A next thing to know about functions is that function parameters can have default values. So I showed this example here, which isn't terribly useful, but I'll go ahead and reproduce it in the REPL so you can see how that works. So as I mentioned, this function isn't particularly useful, but it has the terrific attribute of being relatively simple. So I'm going to create a function named print hello. It's going to take one input parameter. I'm going to name that input parameter name, and its type is going to be string. And if I was doing a normal function, I would just close that parenthesis there, and then I would put the return type here and then an equal sign. But because we're doing a default value for this one, what you do is you just say equals, and then I give it a default value. And now I'll just go ahead and finish the function body. Like so, $name. There we go. And I will show how to use that now. So we just say print hello. So if I do it without passing any parameters in, you see Alvin. And then if I go back there and I put in a name like Joe, you'll see Joe. So again, what happens here is this Alvin is this default parameter right here. And as I mentioned, you define the parameter just like you do normally. So I create a parameter, input parameter named name. Its type is string. And then the only difference here is that you provide the default value after an equal sign like that, right there. So when you don't provide a value, it uses the default right there. And if you do provide a value, it uses that value you provide. So in the book, I provide a much more useful example. And this one is called getURLData. So that's the name of the function. It takes this parameter is named URL and it has the type string. This parameter is named connection timeout. It's an int, and then its default value is 5,000. So this is in milliseconds here. So 5,000 milliseconds is 5 seconds. And then I provide another parameter here named read timeout. Again, it's an int, and its default value is 5,000. And then inside the body, all I do is print that information out here, and then I return, here's the real data. And of course, what you would do here is you would be getting information from the URL, and you would be returning that as a string right there. So I'm just kind of mocking this internal part right there. And so I can demonstrate this example, and the first thing I'll do is paste in that function. So this should be exactly the same as the function I just showed, has these 3 parameters and this body right here. So I hit enter, that creates the function. And then what I want to do is show a couple of different ways to use that function. So I could say getURLData. And then the first thing you would do is provide a URL. So that'd be : / whatever that URL is. And then in this case, you don't have to provide any other parameters, and just hit enter there. And you'll see that the 2 timeout values are there. So the C timeout, the connection timeout, and then the read timeout are both 5,000. And that's because it got the default values here and here. But what you can also do is basically the same thing. And now I can provide a value for the connection timeout. So let's call that one 8,000. So for some reason, I want that to be 8 seconds. And I can do that. And then you see that value right there. And then I can also provide a different value here. So I could call that one, let's say 10,000. And then you see that value right there. And that's more of a real world example of how to use default values for function input parameters. And if there's a key here, I suppose the first one is knowing the syntax right there. And then the second one is when to use this. The benefit of this approach is that you can use these reasonable default values, or you can let the caller of your function assign whatever default values they want to assign. And then a third and final note is that your function appears to be overloaded. So to the caller, it appears like you've written 3 functions, where this function takes 1 input parameter, this function takes 2 input parameters, and this function takes 3 input parameters.